Hello, my name is Scott, and I'm going to briefly go over 3 different products that will help you as a professional generate business quote documents, convert those business quotes into invoices, and then have the ability to query invoices and also receive alerts whenever customers are past due in their payments. So this video is meant to be very brief and lightly touch on the 3 different apps that make up the Bizmonger solution for service professionals. So again, we're going to go over Quote Builder, which is the app for generating quotes. After that, we're going to touch on Quote Viewer, in which we take these recently generated quotes that Quote Builder has provided us, and we have the ability to search based on customer name, and also with a quote that a customer says, okay, yeah, do this job for me, we're going to leverage Quote Viewer to actually convert that quote document into an invoice document. And then we're also going to touch on Invoice Viewer, in which Invoice Viewer will take a recently converted quote that is now an invoice based on the user workflow of Quote Viewer. It's going to take that invoice that was recently converted from a quote and give the user the ability to now receive automated alerts when customers are past due in their payments. And also they can search invoices by customer name, etc. So let's get started. Again, we're going to go over Quote Builder, Quote Viewer, and Invoice Viewer. First, let's talk about Quote Builder. Okay. Now, as soon as you launch Quote Builder, you're going to see the following. This is the landing page when you first launch it. Okay. We have our recommended apps that you should be aware of in order to take advantage of this enterprise solution. So, I mean, we see right here, recommended apps, Quote Viewer, Invoice Viewer, a brief description about the features that they provide. And then over on this right-hand pane, we have a privacy policy. This privacy policy is required by the App Store to say, hey, this is how we're going to use your data that is basically going across the wire on the internet. So if and when you decide to accept the terms for this privacy policy, you go ahead and just go to continue. From here, you have the ability to go ahead and put in your profile. Now there's 2 profiles when you first get started on Quote Builder. One is just putting in your name and your email address, which is your business email address. Alright, so we just say scott.nimrod@bizmonger.net. Alright. Once we put in the email, Microsoft App Store policies, they don't allow normal developers to just behind the scenes create a file and then take the data that you input as a user and just apply it towards that file. In order to have access to files, you, the user, have to literally give the application permission to access a specific file or even access a folder. So right here, there's choose a folder for storing your data. When we click on this, it's basically saying, hey, just pick a directory or a folder where we can create a file for you to house your data, so that all these different apps, Quote Builder, Quote Viewer, and Invoice Viewer, they can all leverage the data and also save data to the specific file based on the folder that you're specifying us to have or giving us permission to have. So we're choosing the documents folder, and that's it. All we did was say, hey, you now have access to the documents folder to create whatever file you need to create. Once we do that, this business button becomes enabled, and now we're going to be entering our business profile. So in our case, my business is Bizmonger. I could put in whatever phone number I want. Put in some random address, right? And we go ahead and save that profile. As soon as we save it, we immediately get brought to the home page. This home page is really a kind of like a sales screen, where now you could add your services that you want to ring up and generate a quote for. Right? So in order to do that, you swipe your hand across the top, and there's a services button. When you click on services, because there's no services defined, because we had just launched this app for the very first time, we immediately get prompted to enter in a new service. In this case, let's say I'm a mechanic or something, and I do oil changes. I'm going to enter in a oil change service. For a description, I'm just going to say it's a standard oil change. It's a recession, so I'm going to charge $19.99. I'm going through hard times and I need customers because I'm just getting started. And for a tax percentage, since I want to follow the rules by the local, city, state, whatever authorities, then go ahead and we're going to say 10%. So what we're doing is we're defining a service that we perform as a professional. In this case, I'm saying that, hey, I want to register a service that I'm going to provide called an oil change. The description of this oil change is, I don't know, I'm going to call it standard, because maybe I may have another service called a deluxe oil change that's, instead of $20, it's $30. And we're just filling out general information about this service. We go ahead and save that, and now in our services we have an oil change. Now there's also, if you take note, a materials part of this, in which, well, some services may have materials or supplies that are associated to the cost of doing a job. So in our case, for an oil change, maybe maybe we need some oil. So if you swipe again at the top or even at the bottom, we have our app bar, and now we have an opportunity to click on materials. Right? You click on materials, we now have a oil change, new material. All right, so in here, let's just say oil. Let's say we're using standard oil as our description, and it's $1.99. And in order to do an oil change, in general, not really knowing the details about the type of car, let's say we need 5, and we're going to provide our own user-defined quantity type, and we're going to call it quarts. So for our oil change, one material that we're going to introduce is oil. It's standard, and it's $1.99, and it's 5 quarts. Okay, we go ahead and save that. If you notice, our oil change has been updated, where now we have materials, a materials cost allocated for it. We see our description right here, standard. We see our labor is $19.99. Our subtotal, our tax has been applied. We added a 10% tax to it, and this is our grand total for that service. Now all we did was we just defined or registered a service. You could think of this phase of registering services as really configuring the templates that you're going to use to generate business quotes and make minor adjustments or tweak your quote based on each job or each customer. All right. So let's say not only do we provide oil change as a service, but if we swipe down and display the app bar, we hit this new, as in new service. Let's say we also, I don't know, we do tune-ups. All right, I don't know how to spell tune-up. I don't know if it's 2 words or 1 word, but we do tune-ups, and for the labor we're going to charge $49.99, and we're also charging our government's charging 10%. So go ahead and save that, and we now have a tune-up. Right, if you notice that this is context sensitive, so when we touch oil change, we see oil change is $32.93. That's the total price for it, and we see the materials is $9.95, etc. We touch on tune-up. Well, we haven't associated any materials to it. Our labor is $50, and with tax and everything, we're at almost $55. Now, with a tune-up, maybe we want to associate a material to it. Specifically, we want to associate an air filter to our tune-up, because tune-up's not a tune-up until we have an air filter. And our air filter is $19.99. So in regards to quantity, we only need 1 air filter for a tune-up, right? Remember, we're looking up here, tune-up, new material. We only need 1 air filter, and I think units is a good enough quantity type. We don't need to define a new type like we did for an oil change. So we're just going to save this information. And if you notice, for our tune-up, our materials has been updated at $19.99. Well, what else do we need for a tune-up? Maybe we need spark plugs as well. So if we invoke the app bar, touch materials, we're going to add new, and we're going to say spark plugs. Not sure if that's 1 word or 2 words. I don't know how much spark plugs are. I'm gonna say it's $3.99. And if I have a V6, maybe I need 6 spark plugs. I don't know. Units is okay. And we're gonna save this. So for a tune-up, new material, we're adding spark plugs. The cost is $3.99. We're associating 6 spark plugs as a material for doing a tune-up, and we just save it. We see that gets added to our tune-up materials. In addition to our air filter, we now have spark plugs, and this is context sensitive, right? So air filter is $19.99 for 1. Spark plugs is $3.99, and there's 6 of them. So that's really 6 times $3.99. Okay. If we hit the back button, we're back to our services, and we see that our tune-up has been updated to have a total cost of $103.31. And we see our materials has grown to $43.93. So what we've done so far is we've configured 2 different services for us to use when we're going to generate quotes: oil change and a tune-up. Okay. Now remember that on our home screen, we don't have anything added as an entry, or we don't have any services registered for us to generate a quote. So we're going to do that now. We bring down the app bar, hit services, we're going to select oil change. That gets added, right? And we're going to also do, we're about to get rich for our first customer. We're also going to do a tune-up. And small bug. Hopefully that'll change. I'll fix that later. We're going to also register a tune-up. From there, on our sales screen, we have an oil change. $29.94 is the price. The tax is $2.99. Tune-up $93.92, tax $9.39. It's just and then we have our summary of the total cost, right? So what we've just done is we've just registered or added 2 services that we want to generate a quote for. Now, the next thing we do is we we now have an opportunity to, oh yeah, and this is just a wizard, right? So simply just swipe. We now have opportunity to make adjustments to our services. All right, so the first opportunity we have is make an adjustment to the materials for an oil change materials. And so this one we can update to whatever, right? Like 1, 2, it's a small little book, 3, 4, 455, whatever. I think originally we had 5 quarts, and so we probably want to keep it like that. So we're not making any updates to the amount of oil. For a tune-up, we have another opportunity to update the quantity for the materials, and you also have the ability to remove items as well. But we're okay with that. If we continue through our wizard, in which we just swipe along to the end, we now have an opportunity to generate a quote for our specific customer. So let's say my customer is Keith Bryan, and his phone number is 216, I don't know, 555-9977, and his email is bebop at, I don't know, yahoo.com. We just define, general information about our customer: first name, last name, phone number, email, and also a title. And let's update the title from oil change to car maintenance. And from there, we swipe for the app bar, and we want to generate this quote, right? Hit generate. And from there, we have our quote. Now, we see that this quote is, it may be small. If we want to enlarge it, we simply just tap on the document and we download it to our browser. And then we have a better look at our quote. So we see that this is our profile information: Bizmonger, our address, email. We see the title for this quote, car maintenance. And if we look over here on the right hand top margin, we see the reference number, the date that this quote was generated, and our customer, Keith Bryan, bebop at yahoo.com, and then his phone number. For the quote itself, we see a table for services and we see a table for materials. For our service, we have oil change, we have a description, and then we have our price and the tax. So $19.99 at 10%. And then we also have a tune-up within our service that makes up our business quote and the price. For materials, these are all the materials that are packaged up in our quote. Oil, an air filter, and spark plugs. We have our description, and then we have our quantity. Then over here we have the reference number for our quote, the date that it was generated on, and the total cost of our quote, which is $136.25. It seems kind of expensive for an oil change, but I mean, we look at the materials that were consumed in the service, and maybe it makes sense. You can configure it however you want, but that's our quote. So that's what I've recently demonstrated, and let's check out Quote Viewer to be able to do searches and also potentially convert this recently generated quote to an invoice if the customer decides to accept it. All right.